Explaining Explainability. In this podcast, we bring together the different disciplines of the Collaborative Research Center Constructing Explainability. Two researchers discuss a concept around explainability from their point of view. Moderated by Professor Britta Wrede.
Welcome to the second episode of our podcast. So today we want to talk about the process of explaining. So from the scientific perspective of linguistics, but also from computer science, and how does the process of everyday explaining actually look like, and how can it be transferred to XAI systems? And which strategies of interactive explanation still exist in explainable AI, and what is still missing so far? So my guests today are, again, the speakers of the Collaborative Research Center Constructing Explainability, Professor Katharina Rohlfing, psycholinguist at the University of Paderborn, and Professor Philipp Cimiano, computer scientist at Bielefeld University.
Katharina Rohlfing is full professor of psycholinguistics at the Paderborn University, where she is heading the Sprachspiellabor for research on language development in children. She is involved in interdisciplinary and international projects in which she is investigating multimodal social interaction, especially the process of scaffolding the interaction partner, also how robotic partners can achieve it. Her research currently focuses on interactive adaptivity.
Yeah, hello Katharina, hi.
Hello, great to be here again.
Yeah, great to have you here.
Philipp Cimiano is full professor for computer science at Bielefeld University. He leads the Semantic Computing Group at the Cognitive Interaction Technology Center. His fields of research include knowledge representation and engineering, natural language processing, knowledge acquisition and computational argumentation. He is co-founder of two spin-offs, Simalytics and Mercury AI.
Hi, Philipp.
Hi, I'm excited to be here again.
Yeah, thank you both actually for being here again. And let's just jump into it. So last time we have talked about explainability, which is a concept that comes actually more from computer science. And what would you say is the difference actually between explainability and explaining? So why is explaining also such an important concept, or why do you think it's important for explainable AI?
I would start, Philipp, if
Sure,
that's okay. Explainability, it's you make something explainable, right? So maybe something that was not visible as explainable so far. So imagine, for example, that you are grading written exams, right? And you are doing it very well. And you have a written exam and you are able to put a grade down on that. But basically, how do you do it? What categories do you have in mind that you come to this conclusion, to the grade? You don't know. Many teachers are actually doing it. I think increasingly they are doing it according to categories, which make the whole process explainable. So they are having the categories, they are checking them, having the checklist at the end. Their judgment becomes explainable with the categories. But explaining process is, of course, different because it is more about the interaction and the way how do you actually convey the information to the addressee. So if you have something to say, if you know more and the other person knows less, how do you actually transport or work towards the understanding of the other? And here you just heard that I did two metaphors for that. So one would be the transportation metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. I, as a more knowledgeable person, have to pack something and to deliver it to the addressee. The other one is more a co-constructive way, so to work with the addressee towards a goal that we have. The second one, so the co-working idea requires more, because the first one, you have a package, so you are, as the explainer, responsible to pack the package. So you pack everything that you consider as important, and then basically you push the package to the addressee, and that's her or his way to unpackage it in some way. But the co-working idea, the metaphor, implies that you actually need to find out with the addressee what should the explanation be about. So what is important to her or him? What should be the topic? Maybe you had something in mind, and considered something as very important, but the addressee doesn't. So you need to align with the addressee. And it becomes really more dynamic and more complex. So those two ways of putting the explanation process at the start.
Yeah. Philipp, would you add on that, or do you just subscribe to that?
Well, to a large extent, I would subscribe to that. I would say also that explaining is the actual more empirical phenomenon that one can study. So explainability as such is a more abstract notion that has to deal more with the fundamentals of what are characteristic of things that can be explained. So while Katharina was talking, I was trying to see if I can come up with an analogy, and maybe it's good to have the analogy. It helped me to understand something. So if we talk about the if you talk about drinking, maybe this sounds a bit silly, the example, but if you think about drinking, okay, you can be concerned with drinkability, but that is more about the aspect of the fluid maybe that you are going to drink, and examining more the material properties of it. Rather than drinking, this is when you would more investigate how is the interaction between someone and this liquid, basically. Okay, so what does happen when someone actually ingests that liquid, and what does he or she do to do it, and what's the consequence of that? So that's why I'm saying it's the more observable notion that is more prone to basic empirical investigation.
This is actually very nice because it shows the difference. Also, Philipp pointed to it. Explainability is a noun, and it can be an abstract one, right? So more abstract, but explaining is a process that you can actually observe. So it is going somewhere, and it has it's changing the world, right? So it needs to be observable in some way.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And would you also say that explaining is something that we more know from our everyday lives, and that it's more like everyday explanations? And is this a contrast to classical explainable AI?
I was struggling with I still continue to struggle every day with the notion of everyday explanations versus scientific ones. But for me, when we talk about scientific explanations, we typically talk about, a more holistic and complete understanding of something that is about, modeling maybe completely how a system or a certain phenomenon works. Yeah. When we talk about everyday explanations, we're looking more at the practical impact of those things. I mean, in everyday situations, you might not always need a complete picture or model of how something works, but you need that bit of information that allows you to do a next step. For example, imagine I asked someone in the morning, I'm in a new house, and say, I don't know how your coffee machine works. What do I need to press in order to get my coffee? So if the person now starts me to explain how the coffee machine is built internally, that might be a complete explanation of the coffee machine, but that's completely irrelevant in that moment, especially when you're tired and you need your first sip of coffee. Then the explanation is suffice. If you press this button, then the espresso will come out. Okay, that's a everyday explanation that empowers you to do the next step and get what you want.
To get coffee.
Hopefully. I think this is an important way of looking at it, not from explanations and whether they are scientific or everyday, but actually what the addressee needs. So in that exact situation, is it more a way of enabling somebody, or really is it about a deeper comprehension? By the way, some colleagues of this CRC are writing a paper about understanding, and this is an important distinction that we made between enabling and comprehension. So comprehension would be something that is deep, maybe scientific, so it enables you also to have to get to know causal relationships of things. But enabling is rather about some very simple actions, like press a button here, not there, right? So it is really about simpler actions.
Yeah. So would you probably both say, I don't know if I understood it correctly, but you would both say that actually both, also in explainable AI, you probably need both kinds, depending on...
I think so, yeah.
On the context?
I think that both have a role to play in explainable AI, because there are cases where you really need full understanding of a model, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's imagine I am an organization that is using a model to do some decisions. Then I as the organization need a scientific model, of a complete model of this model that I'm basing my decisions on, because I need to understand and be accountable for whatever this model does.
Yeah.
However, if I'm someone that is receiving a particular recommendation by an algorithm, it might be enough just to get a small punctual information that allows me to quickly understand, well, what happened here? Why did the algorithm suggest this thing? But I don't need to understand the algorithm as a whole.
One characteristics of maybe making a distinction between everyday and scientific explanations could be the questions, a question that is leading you. So in scientific explanations, there is a focus on why question, why is it that way? But in everyday, it could be a focus on how. So how can I do it? I press the button here.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for this introduction, and already we are starting to dive into the research, but so that's our next part. We will talk a little bit more in detail about the specific research projects and research questions to address actually all these issues here. Yeah, so maybe I start with you, Katharina, because how does explaining work? You have already started to describe it a little bit, but can you tell a little bit more what strategies do we use when explaining something to someone? And also maybe can you name some projects and how they tackle maybe this question?
Okay, I will start maybe with the project I'm involved in, so A1 project, but I'm working together with my colleague from pedagogical psychology, that's the right label for it, Professor Heike Buhl, and with my colleague from computer science, Stefan Kopp, Professor Stefan Kopp, I should mention.
Yes.
And we have the A1 project is about adapting processes within the explanation process. And what we are doing actually in this project is to look how both the explainer and the explanee adapt to each other in the process, of explaining, and how they actually work toward the goal of understanding something. We are looking at game explanations, and we have discussed it a lot, what actually to look at. So what should we have as a subject of our investigation? But we decided for game explanations because they are actually enabling somebody, on the one hand, providing with a lot of insights, and also on the other hand, they are in itself, they are combining a lot of knowledge. So you have a lot of relationships that you need to understand for rules, materials, goal of the game. Everything needs to be connected in a meaningful way. So we decided that it is a good domain to start with. In the first step of our project, we wanted actually to, we are and were very excited about the idea how basically the explainer and the explainee adapt to each other. But it is difficult to think of. There is actually little methodological instrument for that. So really looking at an interaction as an unfolding process. So how can you measure not only how many questions the addressee was asking, and that's it, but what kind of questions were asked at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Okay, so now I divided the interaction into 3 pieces, but what is actually the middle of the interaction? We don't know. So there are some hints from linguistic research, conversational analysis, telling us that there is a opening phase, or maybe something like establishing topic relevance, and then constituting explanandums on the topic of explaining. But actually, we found out in our first research that it is not set up and then it's done, but it is coming again and again. So it is those phases are not very strict.
Could you say something about explanandum? So what does it mean to set up the explanandum? Shouldn't that be clear? I mean, it's the game, and so
this is the domain, basically. We are talking about the domain, but what needs to be explained, maybe you know already the rules because you associated them with a similar game. But now we should talk more about the material, because that's something that is crucial. So both partner needs to negotiate basically what they are talking about and what is next coming. And so this is the content can be a rich one, and we can change it during our interaction. Okay. And what I also wanted to mention, because it is really an achievement from the A1 project working together with A4 project, linguists were working together for this paper, was that we have observed some kind of monological phases. So when an explainer is starting, to transfer knowledge, and in a monological way to just first set up the flow and maybe tells what she or he knows. And there is a dialogical phase, so there is more interactive phase between the explainer and explainer. And they are then more, the explainer might ask more questions, for example, or to tell more the wish to explicate something more, right? So in this dialogical phases, they are working together. But the phases are coming back in, so they are not set up. For example, you always start with the monological. You actually, there was a hint in the data that this is the case. So explainers start with the monological phase, but how quickly the dialogical phase will come, it was very variable.
But I mean, that seems very natural, right? I mean, because without a start, right, you cannot even ask something, right?
That's true.
And have you, probably not, but I still ask, have you found differences? I mean, there must be huge differences between these monological parts and how well they equip the explainee with, I don't know, with tools or so to ask. Because I can imagine, I mean, we all know probably teachers or professors who gave explanations for 1 hour, and you I don't know, by God, you didn't know what to ask, because you just didn't have any idea what he was talking about. And so do you see these differences, that some are more, more open, or more, eliciting more questions?
So yes, this is definitely our goal, but we are not there yet. So we don't know what is eliciting questions, but we started basically to in our analysis, we started to look at the explanee, and really to first was to categorize all the questions they can ask, right? So what kind of questions they can ask, how they vary and differ, what is how in specific settings when they ask questions, will they remember something better than that before?
Yeah. And so what kinds of questions do they ask? Do you have already come up with categories or something? I mean, because this is it's in an open world and they could ask any kind of question.
It is true. So depending on the task and the domain. So we started with two different the one was a setting that was very naturalistic. So it was actually in medical context, consultations between patients and physicians. And then the other context was just, learning of new labels for strange objects, and they were explained by somebody. So basically in those very different contexts, the questions that the explanee will ask were very, very different and depending very strongly on the task goal.
Okay, I see. And I also guess there are many, many factors influencing that, like prior knowledge,
what you can do, and what are your options, what is requested from you to know and to learn. Yes.
So this sounds horribly difficult, and I'm now turning to Philipp as a computer scientist, because the question is, of course, when we observe these kinds of really complex structures these are human explanations, and we want to transfer that to machines. Do we have any chance of doing that, or where do you start in doing that? At what point, where would you localize yourself or your research in this quest?
So we try to, in fact, as Katharina was saying, we try to see explaining as a dialogue. And there has been a lot of work in computer science on formalizing and capturing the characteristics of dialogues. And there the standard model is what we call the sequential model, in which the basic idea is that a dialogue consists of utterances of the different parties. So utterances could be seen as the contributions of every partner to the dialogue. Okay. And then what Katharina was saying for us would be a sequence of contributions or of utterances. And this is the way how we as computer scientists manage to break this down into something that we can computationally manage. Because at the end, the sequence is an algorithmic structure that we can work with. And then one of the interesting questions, so traditionally in the research on dialogues, people have put a lot of effort in modeling what we call dialogue acts. So dialogue acts are those things that we can do in a dialogue. So in a typical situation, like here, I would greet you, you would greet me, then I might introduce a first opening topic, then you might elaborate on that topic. So there's a kind of vocabulary that we can use to describe in more formal terms the repertoire of things that we can do. And of course, this is rather abstract, but that gives us also some generalization abilities. And we, in many projects, are trying to study, what is this repertoire of acts that exists, and how can we formalize them. And we call them in particular very often explanation moves.
Okay.
And this is a question that we look into some of the projects that I am. So for example, the B1 project, where we have the goal of defining a dialogue protocol for explanations, that's very much in that line. And also in the which stands for infrastructural project, we try to come up with a characterization of what are these moves that appear in these sequences.
But you already mentioned it, a generalization. I know what your take on this is, but of course the question imposes itself: how general can these dialogue acts or these explanation moves be? I mean, we have seen also with dialogue acts, they tend, even though you think they should be general, but in the end, in any application, they tend to become very application dependent.
Yes, I think obviously there are always limits to how general this can be. And that's also, in fact, also part of the research question, like to understand how well can they transfer to different settings and domains. And of course, in some sense, when we come up with this repertoire that I mentioned of explanatory moves, we go empirically. So we look at the data we have and try to from there derive these kind of moves.
Yeah.
Or we look at the literature. So in some sense, of course, we are always bound either by data or what other people have published already.
Yeah.
About that. But we do try to capture things at the fairly general level. So for example, moves could be something like signaling partial understanding.
Okay.
That could be one move. So when you say, oh yes, I got that, but can you explain this part again? So that's like you're signaling that you got something, and of course that you understood partially what the explanation was, but then you're requesting some detail. And that's of course a very, very frequent move that you find in many, many settings, because obviously it's a natural thing to tell the other person, well, we are grounded or aligned to some extent, and give cues about what is the part where I need some more information or elaboration. So it's like part of the Gricean maxims. I mean, Grice postulated that the dialogue is always cooperative.
Yeah.
Okay, and I would say that explanations to a great extent also follow that, at least in many settings. I mean, Katharina might disagree on that aspect, but when we explain, we try to be cooperative in general terms. So this means that being cooperative in terms of explanation means that you give cues to the person who's explaining about which parts you've understood and which ones not. So then an explanatory move like signaling partial understanding is quite universal. Of course, the way this is realized is extremely contextualized.
Yeah.
Okay,
And also
how would I signal partial understanding? That can differ a lot from the setting, from the relationship that exists between the two people, and so forth. Okay, that's what I mean with generalization. Maybe this is a good way to clarify this, that we try to seek things that are invariant and would occur in many different settings, but of course they would be realized possibly differently.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And I also guess probably it's very difficult to really pinpoint what exactly it was that has not been understood. You made it sound very simple or easy, but
No, it's not simple. And that's the reason why it's part of the deal, basically, that I mean, everyone has the intuition when you're in an explaining process. I mean, the more you help the other part to understand where you're currently stuck, the more goal-directed the explanation process can be.
Yeah.
So, for example, sometimes my children sometimes say, I need help with mathematics. And then I say, well, what did you understand? And then they say nothing. So this is very uncooperative. Okay.
Yeah, or maybe the teacher didn't provide them with hooks to ask questions.
Who knows?
Yeah. But Katharina, do you also so I mean, you just pointed to the need actually for the explainee to work with you.
Yes, exactly.
And do you see that also in your data, that the explainee contributes to the explanation?
Definitely. But I also wanted to stress that, just to contribute a lot, it requires also a lot from the explainee. It is interesting. We had some ideas for this co-working or co-construction from tutoring literature, and there is a large body of research by Michelin Chi on some framework that she called interactive, constructive, active, and passive learning. And she developed a hierarchy of learning. So when you are learning something in a passive way, you will get less from it than you are if you are learning in a very interactive way. But this interactive way requires from you as a learner to really work for it. So it is not only to be active, and have some task maybe to do, to fill some lines, and that's it. But it requires a knowledge construction from you. And I think this is the key toward a good explanation. So it is the contribution of the explainer who is really not only listening, but trying to mentally construct the explanandum with the explainer, and also monitoring maybe herself or himself. What do I understand and what do I not understand, and how can I ask a question that really addresses this gap? But this is just a global idea of how this co-construction might work. We don't know it yet, but deriving those ideas from the tutoring research, I think a good explanation or a good explaining process might really require a lot of work from the explainer. And this is actually something that we learned. And we are now also telling our students. So when they, come to our lecture or seminar and expect that we provide everything to them. So we are, no. We now learned that you need to be interactive and please work with me and ask questions and be active and don't wait until the end of the term and then ask questions, but ask them again and again. So just challenge me, or interact with me, so I can provide a better, more tailored input to you. So it is not always in explanations overall, but really a good method of teaching or providing that social interaction.
And does it work?
Well, at least it is a message, right, that you made and a statement, and then you clarify the expectations. To some degree, yes. I think that the students feel encouraged, at least, to really be active or become active.
Do we maybe even need to, to teach? Maybe not the students to ask questions, but also to teach the people to ask questions to an AI system, because that's usually not what you're doing, right? I mean, you ask Google, but you already have an idea what kinds of questions you ask and not others. And is that maybe something that might be a result, right, of the research center that we find out? But
I think you are making a very important point here. So yes, I would say yes, definitely, because I think that we experience as persons, as learners, and as explainers, maybe too many situations in which we have a very passive role of just receiving the input and that's it. And we now really need to be more active and to get better in this activity, right?
Yeah.
So I would say yes, we need to teach more.
Yeah, so thank you for these insights into the details of your research. And again, we have already dived into a little bit more of these societal concerns, and I think we are going to finish with that and look more into the societal issues now. So I was actually wondering, and I think this is also one important question in the CRC, can explanations, on the other hand, also lead to an unjustified reliance on AI recommendations and hypotheses?
Yes.
Okay, that was a quick answer.
I think definitely. Because, it's also with it, you see that also in humans. I mean, when you... it has been studied in cognitive sciences that when we explain, we often don't say what really drove our decision making, but we construct something ad hoc a posteriori, often to justify what we did. Yeah. And so first of all, explanations don't always reflect the truth. They are sometimes a posteriori construction that makes things as they fit. Mm-hmm. And the question is, will that be different for AIs? But some AIs are like this. So, for example, there are AIs systems where the explanations are generated using a different model than the one that actually took the decision. So we talk about proxy models. Mm-hmm. And we see that. And then the question is, well, the explanation that is given, is that the one that really was in some sense the actual cause or the actual reason why a system decided to do something.
Yeah, and also
and then also good explanations as everywhere can create the impression that the AI has considered all the options. So it can sometimes create the illusion that the system is rational and has sort of considered all the options, while this might not be the case.
Yeah.
So in the last podcast we were talking about contrastive explanations. Mm-hmm. So contrastive explanations is something that obviously requires some deeper elaboration process, and that also suggests that the person that uses a contrastive explanation suggests that I have a lot of knowledge to oversee many options and I'm able to contrast them. Yeah. So this creates the message that we have a lot of knowledge about the subject field which we're explaining. And of course, if AIs create contrast, they could suggest that they know more than they actually are able to oversee.
Yeah, I understand. But is it even possible for us as humans to really understand, even if the AI was really good and considered all the options, but is it possible for us as humans to understand all these things? You know what I mean? Because just our memory is not sufficient. I mean, if you have like I don't know, 30 features or even more, and you can, and I mean, I think we humans are maybe biased to unicausal, how it's called, to just assume that there was one cause and this is the main cause. And then we have these complex relationships, and maybe it's not possible for us to understand that there are so many things that caused this.
We have one project, C1, and this is on healthy distrust. And they are researching exactly that. So how can, maybe a particular mindset be built up in persons to approach the AI in a quite critical manner. But I think it definitely requires more research to know better how to cope with that, because the risk, as you mentioned, with the over-reliance is definitely there. Mm-hmm. Philipp, just to add from the social interaction perspective. So what's happened when you start an explanation, you are getting a role in this interaction as a more knowledgeable person, because usually the expectation is that the more knowledgeable person is able to explain something. She knows more. And then there is, of course, clear expectation that and trust and responsibility on that person to maybe take over and to decide something, to suggest something, and so on. So this is clearly causing expectation within the social interaction. And no wonder that there is something like over-reliance. If there is an interaction even with a machine system, and it explains something, then it impresses certainly within this interaction.
Oh, okay. So thank you really very, very much. Here we are ending actually with open questions, and we have more questions than before. And I think I collected already some topics for the next podcast. So thank you very much for being here, Katharina, Philipp, for all your providing your insights and sharing them with us. And yeah, thank you, and hope to welcome you here maybe soon again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
Explaining explainability. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions about this topic, feel free to ask them in the comments. We look forward to welcoming you to our next episode.